Michael Montero coming to you from my rooftop. I was just thinking about the Santa Cruz Frampton fight, and I had 10 quick, brainstorms, observations. Just thinking about the fight, man. Number one, crowds do make a difference. Look, a lot of you guys out there complain about your fighter getting ripped off in decisions or not getting respect. Travel to their fights, make your impression felt. The Irish fans traveled to that Santa Cruz Frampton fight, and it made a huge impact on the fight, which brings me to my second point. I really think that Santa Cruz was affected by that crowd. I think he was intimidated early on. If you saw, he was a little shook, a little tentative in those early rounds and built a big hole for himself. He came on late and made the fight close, but he dug such a big hole for himself, and I think a big part of that was due to the crowd. So travel, make your impression felt. Number three, this was a good fight, but some of you guys out there have called it like the fight of the year. It's not, okay? Vargas Salido was the fight of the year for 2016. That's done. That's not being topped, all right? End of discussion. This was kind of on the level of a Thurman Porter, right? Top 10 fight of the year candidate. You could even make an argument that it was better than Thurman Porter, because you could make an argument that Frampton and Santa Cruz are better pound for pound than Thurman and Porter, but not fight of the year. Number four, there needs to be a rematch. There has to be a rematch. Now, Santa Cruz would like it to be in Los Angeles, but A, Uncle Al can't afford to bring it to Los Angeles right now with the financial problems the PBC is having, and B, Frampton won the fight, so he gets to call the shots in the rematch. I think the best scenario here is to put it on in New York again, and if you're gonna do this right, make it the co-feature to a Thurman Porter rematch. And if you really want to do it right, put Danny Garcia on the card, put Gary Russell or Lee Selby on the card to build future opponents for the winners of those rematches. That is how the PBC can really start to build a brand and become the UFC of boxing, which is, I think, their ultimate goal. Number five, the featherweight division is really good right now. There's several titleists, right? You've got Frampton, Selby, Russell, Valdez, Cuellar, you got Jojo Diaz and other prospects like that coming up, but there's no unification. There needs to be unification. Featherweight is one of the storied divisions in the history of boxing. You gotta have a clear number one. Right now you don't. Al Heyman has a vested interest in that division. He has a big chunk of it, and it would be right of him to start to unify some of these titles. Number six, UK boxing is on fire. Over a dozen world titleists right now, and some actual legitimate champions, right? Like the heavyweight champion of the world is Tyson Fury. And you look at some of the prospects coming up, like, speaking of heavyweights, Anthony Joshua, who seems to be the heir apparent of that division. Man, UK boxing is really in a golden age. And it's not just the titleists, it's the prospects coming up. They are in good shape for years and years to come. Number seven, just talking about the fight itself. Look, superior footwork, spacing, and timing usually beats out superior size. We've seen so many cases of this throughout the history of boxing. A smaller guy moving up in weight. You never quite know how he's gonna look until you see him in the ring at that new weight. But for Frampton, it's obvious. He was killing himself to make 122 pounds, and he looked better at 126. His chin looked better, he looked more sturdy, but it was the spacing, it was the distance, the timing, the angles. He was getting in, getting his shots off, and getting out. He was spinning. His shots were straighter. Leo's shots were really wide, and Frampton was coming right up the middle with some uppercuts. He was catching him with hooks. Beautiful use of footwork to outmaneuver your taller, longer opponent's jab and get inside of that. Brilliant stuff from Carl Frampton. Number eight, speaking of Carl Frampton, is he pound for pound now? A lot of people out there are saying, man, he's now a pound for pound top 10 fighter. I don't disagree. You can absolutely make an argument that he's cracking the bottom of that top 10 pound for pound list. But let's keep things in perspective, okay? Yes, he's unified titles now. Earlier this year with Scott Quigg, he unified titles at 122. He's now moved up in weight and won a title in a second division. That's pound for pound level stuff. But he hasn't dominated an elite level opponent yet. The Quigg fight was horrible, and the Santa Cruz fight was very close. I scored at 115, 113 for Frampton. I could live with 114, 114 to draw, as Guido Cavalieri saw it. I could even go as far as 116, 112 for Frampton. Anything outside of that's too wide in my opinion, but he didn't dominate this fight, right? Carl Frampton is still very easy to hit. Leo tagged him more than a few times, especially in the later rounds. And he's undersized at featherweight to a degree, and he still has huge defensive liabilities. Like I said, he gets hit a lot, he lunges in. So pound for pound on the bubble, in my opinion. You can make the case, but he still has some more questions to answer, right? Number 9, is Carl Frampton Fighter of the Year? Here's one where I don't think there's much of an argument. The fight against Quigg earlier this year, regardless of whether it was very entertaining or not, he clearly won that fight, and then moved up in weight and won another title. That's Fight of the Year kind of stuff, right? I think it's very, very clear that Carl Frampton is the leading candidate for Fighter of the Year in 2016. Last point, number 10, Barclay Center in Brooklyn has really now become the StubHub Center of the East Coast, right? I think, a lot of people will say that MSG, Madison Square Garden, is still the mecca of boxing in New York. Okay, I feel you, but to me, it has a corporate kind of feel, like Staples Center here in Los Angeles. Downtown's right over there. Staples Center is that corporate, stuffy kind of environment. You go to StubHub, it's real fight fans. And that's the feeling I get at Barclay Center. It seems to put on the best fights in New York the same way StubHub does here in Los Angeles. It is clear that has become the hot spot on the East Coast for boxing. Let me know what you guys think. Comment below, like, share, subscribe. Cheers.